Yo, Z Community Cuties, what's going on? It's your boy, Azizz Finance in the cut. Now, before you try to say anything, I do want to let you guys know we've updated our uploading schedule. So now instead of uploads every Monday, we're going to be doing it every other Monday. And this is just to kind of put more of a focus on quality rather than quantity, making sure that you, the Z Community Cuties, are getting the best value out of each video that drops. So in today's video, we're actually going to be talking about how you can avoid the risk of being forced to sell your own position. Whether that be on the long-term scale or the short-term scale, you want to make sure that you can avoid this one specific thing called margin calls. Because if you don't, you might be forced to dip into some savings that you didn't really want to touch. What are margin calls? When do they happen? Well, it's basically when you're about to go into a position and you go splitsy with your broker. So your broker puts about 50% and you put 50% of your own cash. Obviously, it depends with different brokers, right? But at the end of the day, margin calls is something that you don't want to be put in. If you want me to dive in deeper as to what margin calls are, stay tuned to the rest of the video because we're going to break this down to the T. Because by the end of this video, you're going to understand the mechanics of a margin call. So how does it work? What exactly is it? And we're going to be touching up at the very end of this video as to how you can avoid these margin calls. So without further ado, let's get this party started, Z Community. So how do margin calls work? Well, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but it's when you're about to put yourself in an investment on margin, which is basically you going up to your broker and saying, yo, my dude, listen, like I'm about to invest $100,000 into the SPY right now, but I need you to help me out. So let's do a 50-50 split where I'll put 50K, you put 50K. Let's call it an investment. And in return, you know what? I'll pay you some interest every month. Why not? And obviously you have to do this in a margin account, which in Canada right now, I think is only offered by Questrade, Interactive Brokers, and a couple of other these smaller guys that are beginning to pop up into the game right now. Now, in order to understand how margin calls work, you need to understand what MR is, also known as maintenance requirement. And the simplest way to kind of understand the maintenance requirement is looking at it as, hey, this is the portion that I need to keep within the investment at all times. Whether it goes up or down, it's this specific percentage that needs to be in from my own hands. Obviously, right? Because the broker is just not going to give you everything and be like, hey man, if this investment goes down to $0, don't worry, like we'll give you our money. It doesn't work like that. This ain't a bank, this ain't a credit card company. The broker has to protect themselves at all costs. So let's try to look at an example to further illustrate this. So you put in $1,000 into an investment, your broker says, hey, we'll put $500 and you put $500. Say less, bro, done deal. Now here's the caveat, right? If your investment goes down, if your investment goes up, that $500 that your broker gave you is always going to stay the same. The only fluctuations that you'll see in the total investment, you're going to see within your own cash position, right? So let's just say the investment goes up from $1,000 total to, let's just say, $1,500. The broker keeps his $500, nothing happens to that, but you actually ended up making a profit of $1,000. That's entirely yours to keep. But conversely, if the investment goes down in value, let's say it goes down to whatever, $750 just for simplicity's sake. The broker in this situation still keeps his $500, but your cash position is actually going to go down from $500, which is what you initially put in, to now $250, which is, you know, it kind of but that's the cost of margin and loaning from your broker. Azizz Finance, where does the margin call kick in? Dude, come on, I gotta explain the basics before I get into the nitty-gritty. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. Now the margin call kicks in once your investment goes below a certain percentage. This certain percentage being your MR, your maintenance requirement, which we literally just talked about a few minutes ago. Using the exact same example we just looked at where you put $1,000 in, but rather than it going down to $750, let's just say that it went to $600. Now applying what we just learned right now, knowing that the broker is going to keep his $500 and you're the only one losing, that means that your initial $500 investment just went down to $100. Now, considering this, let's do a couple of calculations over here. We need to find out how much of a percentage of the broker's money is still within this investment and how much of a percentage of your own equity is within the investment. So let's just take the broker's part first. Your broker still has $500 within the investment, and dividing that by the total value, which is $600, because it went from 1,000 to 6, you're gonna take $500 divided by $600. What does that give you? I'm giving you guys some time to calculate it, but I calculated it's 83%, right? So knowing that, let's look at our side of the deal. Now we know that we have $100 left within this total investment, so we're gonna take $100, divide that by 600. You're gonna get 17%. So Azizz Finance, does this mean that I'm going to go under a margin call or not? Well, it really depends on obviously your broker and the type of investment itself, but it all comes down to a central term, the maintenance requirement. Now, as we kind of touched up on before, the maintenance requirement tells you what percentage of your own money has to be within this total investment at all times. So let's just say in the sake of this example that the margin requirement was 30%. You'll usually find this to be the most common maintenance requirement along all brokers and a majority of investments if they're not too high risk. But nonetheless, now we know that the maintenance requirement is 30%, but we just calculated our portion of the investment, which in total is at $600. But with our money now within it and our loss, we calculated this to be 17%. Obviously, 17% is less than 30%, which means that you would be under a margin call. So what happens when you get all of these messages popping out about a margin call? Well, you can either go one of two routes. The first route is your broker is actually going to force you to sell some, if not all of the positions in your account in order to bring your account back to baseline. Or the other route is they'll actually give you about 1 to 2 business days to deposit a certain cash amount within your account to bring it back to a healthy level. Now, obviously, depending on the type of person that you are, you might have some emergency funds that are outside of your account for situations like these. It's like, oh my god, like I didn't know what a margin call is, so you just take it out of your emergency fund and put it into there. But for those of you who really want to keep that stuff separate and actually use it for an actual emergency, then what you can do is just sell off some of the positions in your account. Obviously, if you're smart enough to diversify your portfolio, have a couple of open positions, you could look at what's profitable right now, what you're comfortable with selling. You just sell and then boom, your account's back to baseline. Nothing crazy is really gonna happen, because at the end of the day, you're the one making the decision rather than your broker being like, well, you know what, I'm gonna sell this, I'm gonna sell that, I'm gonna sell this. And then at the end of the day, you're just like, dude, I didn't wanna, that was my long-term position. Why'd you have to sell that? So those are the two routes that you can ultimately take, and the decision is ultimately yours. So that's how to deal with the margin calls, but how do you avoid them? Well, obviously, the first route is just don't use a margin account at all. If you aren't able to manage your risk, if you aren't able to, deal with the financial consequences of a margin call, don't use margin, my dude. Use your own cash and leave it at that. And that's actually the other way that you can avoid margin calls, is by learning how to manage your risk. So what does managing your risk really look like? Well, it all starts off with a plan and formulating your plan. I always like to tell everybody that I talk to about these types of topics. Number one, identify why you even want to go into this position in the first place. It could be, oh, you know what, the technical indicators that I look at, along with my fundamental analysis, along with some economic indicators, this tells me it's a good opportunity. So good for you, do your thing. Next step, you have to identify what point you're going to enter within the position, and then 2 other price points. Number one, where are you going to sell this specific position if you want to just take your profits? That could be a percentage point, it could be a dollar amount, you decide. The second thing you want to identify is your max loss. So what does the option price have to do for you to be like, yo, that's it, I'm tapping out, I'm cutting my losses, and I'm getting out of the position? After you've decided on your price points, the next thing you want to do is actually follow the plan. Make sure you stick with it. Having all of these 3 things together, you'll end up never finding yourself in a margin call because you're able to manage risk and you're following your plan. Last thing that I want to say for those of you who are long-term investing with margin, I always recommend having a nice margin of safety cash position within your account. So, having a solid, 5%, some people like to say 10% of cash that you're not touching but is staying within your account. Having situations like this will give you that margin of safety that you'll never really find yourself within in a margin call. And you know, with long-term positions, you have to really withstand it. Whatever the market or your certain stock or option does in the long term, it's kind of like you have to hold it long term. I don't know if that made sense, but if it didn't, you could leave me a comment in the comment section below. So now that you know all of the mechanics behind margin calls, how they work, how to avoid them, and how to go around them, that's pretty much all you really need. Obviously, don't go right into margin trading because, you know, have a brain. But nonetheless, if you guys do have any questions or, you know, wanted more clarification on anything we discussed, the comment section is down below. I'm going to respond to you within at least 2 to 4 minutes. So leave me a comment and you guys know the drill from here. I'll see you guys on the next segment. Azizz Finance signing out. Peace.